All right, so we were just joking that the fact that we're starting 5 minutes early proves that we are in fact not politicians.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Not that we don't love you guys.
Unfortunately, that clock is wrong.
All right, welcome. I would like to thank everybody for coming today. My name is Tanya Bashant, and I am the state coordinator for the Connecticut Tea Party Patriots. In a moment, I'm going to introduce to you some extraordinary ladies who are spearheading an extraordinary project. But first, it's important to provide some context on how we arrived at this milestone in our country's history. Today, we welcome back an old era, an era perhaps forgotten in modern times, but nonetheless the seminal era that made this country great. Ordinary citizens banding together to do extraordinary things. A year ago, those standing here did not know each other. We were going about our lives, holding down jobs, paying the rent, riding motorcycles, raising our children. But we shared a common unease, a gnawing discomfort that the country we love, pledge our allegiance to, and serve had gone off track. Just how and when and why is a contentious source of debate. Nonetheless, we knew that the nation was trending in the wrong direction. A year ago, like New Englanders on a chilly December day in 1773, 125 Connecticut citizens of no political note or economic power gathered in Hartford to protest the economic stimulus bill. Since that day, the citizen protesters grew from 125 to many thousands. Since that day, we have rallied, protested, and petitioned our federal legislators. We have repeatedly traveled to Washington by bus and train and car to redress our grievances. We have authored letters to the editor, websites, and blogs. We have asked, and yes, demanded, that the legislators we elected stop hurling us towards certain economic ruin, stop regulating and legislating our liberties away, stop curtailing and crushing the very thing that makes us different from the rest of the world, the freedom to succeed and to fail. On April 15, 2009, over 8,000 people gathered in 5 different locations around Connecticut to send a message to the federal government. Protect us from enemies foreign and domestic, but otherwise, leave us alone. At tea party after tea party, I met citizens, young and old, who just wanted the federal government to understand that we, the people, made this nation great, and only we, the people, could fix our economic problems. Some were older. They had built upon their parents' success and were passing on their knowledge to younger generations in the hopes that their hard-earned knowledge would lead to better things to come. Some were middle-aged, who were taking what their parents had taught them and were struggling to build those dreams. Some were young, just starting in life, who could see that if our country continued on this path of government intrusion, they would never have the ability to live the American dream, and there would be no legacy to leave other than a legacy of crushing debt. You travel this state, you realize that everywhere, ordinary people are doing extraordinary things. They are gathering friends, educating neighbors, rallying citizens to get involved. Working in parallel, but not in concert, these everyday folks created an army of energy, a tidal wave of humanity. So one day last summer, using nothing more than an email invitation, we met over ham sandwiches and beer. A real estate agent, a stay-at-home mom, a veteran, a small business owner, a worker bee who sat in a cubicle all day, a toy salesman, a farmer, and even a preacher. These people, 40 in all if memory serves, from all parts of Connecticut had one thing in common: passion. They had started tea party groups, meetup groups, Facebook pages, 912 groups. They had organized rallies and group book discussions and political action committees dedicated to exposing the most corrupt of our politicians. They were relentless and tireless citizen activists. You may have heard that they were well-funded, but let me set the record straight. They were not funded at all.
Not a dime.
But the coin of their realm was belief. And they believed that anyone, everyone, could change the political landscape forever. And as it turned out, they were right. On that hot day in July, the Connecticut Grassroots Alliance was born. We have built a coalition of 28 different groups. We represent Tea Party activists, Second Amendment advocates, homeschoolers, illegal immigration activists, family rights advocates, and everything in between. We represent the young, the old, the healthy, the infirm, the veterans, the small business owners, the Walmart workers, and judging by those who are standing behind me, even a small but growing group of legislators. We represent anyone and everyone who believes that the government that legislates least legislates best. Which is what brings us to how we arrived here today. On December 24th, the United States Senate passed their version of the health care reform bill. Across the nation, Tea Party patriots had done everything they could think of to stop the government takeover of health care. At that time, we were facing majority in the House, a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, and a president who would gladly sign a bill taking away our ability to choose our own health care coverage. On December 26th, I joined a conference call with 10 other Tea Party activists from around the country. We decided that the only fight we had left was at the state level. 2 days later, another conference call had 20 state representatives on it. By the 5th day, 28 states. I brought the idea to the Connecticut Grassroots Alliance that Tuesday. Once again, some ordinary citizens did some extraordinary things. The Grassroots Alliance reached out to every General Assembly legislator that they knew, many of whom are standing with us today. The idea was simple. The 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution reserves the powers not expressly delegated to the federal government, to the states, or to the people. And in the Constitution state, those are more than just words. In these dire circumstances, when redress of grievances go completely unheeded, that is a call to action. Absolutely. Today we are pushing back. We are demanding that our elected state representatives uphold the 10th Amendment and say no to unconstitutional federal action. We are demanding that our state demand the return of rights reserved to it and to us, and to tell the federal government no.
Yeah.
After 2 months of hard work and outreach, the legislators here today have submitted bills and resolutions that will restore Connecticut to its rightful place, that of a sovereign state in our constitutional republic. The resolution must be raised by the committee, and I am pleased to announce that the committee has agreed to raise the resolution for a public hearing. Pleased to tell you that of the 28 states that ended up on those conference calls, only Connecticut was able to pull this together. I am honored now to introduce to you Deborah Stevenson, founder of the National Home Education Legal Defense, a Grassroots Alliance member. Deborah, along with her sister Estelle Stevenson, state coordinator for the We the People Foundation, an Alliance member, and Vivian Rockwell from Shout Out for America, another Alliance member. They spearheaded this effort, brought the legislators together, and authored the 10th Amendment legislation proposals currently before the committee. Deborah, Estelle, and Vivian will explain the 10th Amendment proposals. Ladies, it is with great pleasure that I hand the microphone over to you.
I don't think I can top that speech, but I will try to explain. Again, from my perspective, it was an idea born in a car ride with my sister not too long ago, that we need to reassert the state's 10th Amendment rights, in addition to joining with the Connecticut Grassroots Alliance and the Tea Party Patriots and what they were doing. I want to say to you that whether we call ourselves the Connecticut Grassroots Alliance or not, we here are the people. And we the people are telling the state, you need to reassert assert the state's rights and protect our Constitution and defend it. A little bit about the background of the 10th Amendment, not to bore you to death, but I do want to just read it to you. It's very simple. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. That means this state already has the right and the power to tell the federal government, any time that the federal government adopts a law that is unconstitutional, we have the right to say no to that law. That's right. We have the right to say no to that law. Despite the fact that we already have that right, we need a method by which to implement that right. We need to tell people that we have that right. And so that's why we propose to the legislators that are standing here today a document that would do that, that would implement it both as a resolution and as a state statute. We had 3 different versions of that proposed to the Government Administration and Elections Committee. Version A was a resolution that urges Congress to exercise only those powers delegated to the United States by the Constitution. Very simple. That's what they're supposed to be doing anyway. Version B is a bill that declares that the state of Connecticut retains sovereignty over all powers and duties not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution, and sets up a method for the legislature to review the federal laws to determine their legality. And it would direct the legislature to tell Congress of the legislature's findings. And version C was identical to version B, but left out the part about telling Congress their legislative findings. This issue is not about political parties. It crosses all party lines. There are members of our group that are Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It doesn't matter. This issue is about the Constitution and protecting and defending it. This issue is about restoring constitutional governance in the Constitution state and protecting the state whenever the federal government oversteps its bounds, no matter which political party is in office in Washington. This is about a number of years that this has gone on by both Republicans and Democrats in Washington adopting laws that are plainly unconstitutional. This would be a resolution and bills that would be in place from this point forward to tell Washington we are not going to take it any longer. I'm very pleased that the Government Administration and Elections Committee chairmen have agreed to raise the resolution. I am, however, somewhat disappointed that they did not elect to raise the bills. But this is a very positive step forward, and I am very thankful to them for that. The ranking members of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, State Senator Michael McLaughlin and State Representative John Hetherington, along with some of their colleagues, Senator Tony Boucher, Senator Dan Devaselis, Senator Sam Caligiuri, State Representative Vincent Candelora, and State Representative Christopher Coutu, all signed a letter requesting the committee chairman to raise all 3 proposals before the committee for a public hearing. Thankfully, we have at least version A, the resolution, that will go to public hearing, and all of us here and the people of the state of Connecticut will get an opportunity to discuss this issue, and I am very grateful for that. The committee deadline for raising bills is Friday, and again, we are grateful for that. The public hearing will be scheduled after that. The people of the state of Connecticut will no longer tolerate, however, the adoption of any unconstitutional laws. This is an issue that is not going to go away, and we are going to continue to call our federal government officials to task and elicit the support of our state representatives and our state senators to help us with this effort. I'm pleased to see other members of the legislature here today whose signatures were not on the letter but are supportive. And I apologize for leaving anyone else's name out. Representative T.R. Rowe is here with us, Senator Rob Kane, and others, and I really appreciate their efforts. I'd like to introduce anyone of the legislature now who would like to come up and tell us their opinion and why they are supportive of that.
State Senator Mike McLaughlin. I want to thank you all for being here, and congratulations to our citizen activists for your leadership, your dedication to the Constitution of the United States. And I know that you put an awful lot of time and effort into focusing on what's best for America and what's best for Connecticut, and I applaud your efforts. I thank you all for being here. I encourage you to continue doing what you're doing. Please take note that Senator Rob Kane co-signed the letter this morning. Senator, thank you for being here today. I also want to take a moment to thank Senator Gail Schlossberg, the co-chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee, for agreeing this morning in our screening meeting to raise the resolution and allow us the opportunity to have the residents of the state of Connecticut talk about how important the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution is to the residents of this state. And so, Senator Schlossberg, I am, on behalf of everyone standing here, want to thank you for your allowing us to proceed to discuss this issue. The 10th Amendment of the United States is important to a lot of people. It may seem mundane to some, but it's important to the people standing here today because they understand that Washington, D.C. has this terrible habit of unfunded mandates being rolled down to the states. And guess what? This state capital in Hartford, Connecticut has the same problem with unfunded mandates being rolled down to local municipalities. So we're raising this issue as it relates to the federal government and the states. But keep in mind that we're also raising this issue in this session of the legislature about unfunded mandates to municipalities. So this is a bigger discussion, but I am grateful for all of you that are here today.
I would also like to thank the ranking members of the G8 committee, Representative John Hetherington, Senator Mike McLaughlin, and also to the chair of this committee, because when this idea originally was brought to my attention by the leaders of your group, particularly Deborah and Tanya, we discussed the possibility of whether something like this could actually make it to this point. And there were a lot of really great ideas, but after much discussion, and I might also add the hard work of our legislative legal staff in the Senate Republican office that worked really hard on this to try to fashion something that could be raised that would be acceptable finally to the chairs of that committee. This, although moved by this particular group, is a very simple and can't really be disputed. That the Constitution says Congress can only pass laws that the Constitution gives them the power to pass. And as was stated, that any power or authority not explicitly given to the federal government cannot be addressed by the federal government. And the feeling is that Congress has gone too far infringing in our lives in ways that only the state should have the power to impact. For example, No Child Left Behind was a federal intrusion into education, an area that the states and local governments are supposed to oversee. Another example, as was mentioned by the individuals here, was so-called healthcare reforms, where the government is trying to dictate the type of healthcare and insurance people should have or not have. And there was even one that was called to my attention yesterday as I was in a screening meeting for transportation that just jumped right out at me. It was a clear example of this, where the state of Connecticut could lose $5 million if it does not expressly write certain language into its laws about an open container in your automobile. And it just really called us to this moment to say that this is something we should be doing, and that quite frankly, with the anger and frustration over the mounting federal infringement in these areas that the Constitution does not give them the authority to do, this is why this movement has grown to such a degree. And quite frankly, it is essential that the feds should only do what is necessary, not what they just want to do. And I think this reaction is the healthiest thing I've seen in our state and federal government in a long, long time. As representatives, it's our responsibility to be the voice of those people. And I'm so thrilled that today we can actually say we carried your message, it's been heard, and now you have an opportunity to tell all of your elected officials what's on your mind and what they should be doing. We should be listening to you, and that hasn't happened. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
I'm John Hetherington, one of the ranking members of GAE, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. You're really an inspiration to us. And it's wonderful that you have raised awareness of this issue. We are a government of enumerated powers. The federal government has those powers enumerated in the Constitution and which are given to the federal government. They do not have authority from anywhere else but from the people and the states. And we need to be reminded of that. And what impresses me so about all of you is that you have come here not to lobby on behalf of some special interest. We hear a lot of that. You are here on behalf of principle, and thank God for you. As we go forward, and reflecting also Senator McLaughlin's remarks, Senator Schlossberg is very fair in agreeing to hear this. I thank you for doing that. I think it reflects both well on her for her integrity. Also, it demonstrates that this is not a partisan matter. The Democrats have as much concern about this as we do. The true Democrats who understand the legitimacy of the federal government's power and how it comes from the people. Our power does not come from a king. It doesn't come from any divine right. It comes from the power of the people as they are inspired to give it to the federal government. And so once we have this hearing scheduled, I hope all you'll be back. I know you will be. I hope you'll be back. And once we have the concept raised, there are a number of directions that can be taken. And so I wouldn't be discouraged about the fact that the actual bills are not being raised. The concept is being put out, and we can speak to it. And so I applaud you for pledging you remember those words, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
Yes,
I think.
sacred honor.
I'm State Senator Danny DeSella. I just want to join in to pick up on not just the philosophy behind this, but the real world impact that this has. And it is a bipartisan effort, so I'm actually going to pick on a Republican bill, which is No Child Left Behind Act. Something that started in Washington, was well-intentioned, and clearly beyond the scope of what the federal government is allowed to do. Because of that, talk to any teacher in Connecticut today, and they will tell you we are over-testing our kids, testing them every year. The teachers are forced to teach to the test. Why? Not because their local school board said, but because Washington is telling us to do it. So you see that the 10th Amendment, by violating it, it's not just a philosophical constitutional argument. It has real-world impact that's having a negative effect on our students here in Connecticut today, because Republicans and Democrats in Washington can't abide by what is clearly stated in the Constitution.
Christopher Pitu. I'm proud of the people today. I think this is a victory for we the people. All too often in this Capitol and in Washington, D.C., bills come from special interests, they come from higher levels, and they are forced down on the people. And this is really a time when the people are stepping up to protect our Constitution, and there's something to be said for that. And I feel the energy in this room, and I hope this continues through the hearings, that you all show up and really stand up, because you are the masses. You're speaking for the majority, and this is just the start. So thank you for being here.
Where's Tammy? Tammy, close it up with Tammy.
Oh, you need me?
Yep. Bring it home. As only you could.
Oh, okay, extemporaneous.
Yes, that's right.
Good. As they say in my business, closing arguments. All right, well, thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, the press, for actually showing up for many months, we had been sending out press releases and trying to get people to come to our rallies and listen to what we had to say. And it took us quite a while, but only a year to get here. And so we're very proud of it, and we're very proud of the thousands of people that are just like us. We're just ordinary, everyday folks. Some of them are actually stepping up and running for Congress, both on the federal and on the state level. And they're coming directly from the grassroots. It doesn't get any more grassroots than this. As I had said in a letter to the editor at Danbury News-Times just a few days ago, this is not really a bottom-up operation because there's no up about it. It's completely sideways. So thank you all very much for coming, and we look forward to the public hearing, and we look forward to the Constitution State being the leader in the United States for protecting and defending the Constitution.
I know that you represent 28 groups and there's divergent views about them.
Yes.
But I would presume that, given your argument, that if the Congress had, instead of what it passed in the House and Senate, had passed a health care tax, you would have seen no problem with that, since they have the authority to pass taxes.
You want to feel that?
Whatever the federal government does that is constitutional, whether or not we agree.
And Social Security, for example, is constitutional. So if there were a health care tax, that would be constitutional.
It's a matter of opinion.
We can argue a lot.
Social Security is not constitutional?
Again, the details of each law are not the point here. The point here is, when you have a law passed in Washington, under what authority is the government adopting?
Right, but the question is, had they not passed the health care bills that passed in the House and Senate, which required people to buy insurance, and there was private insurance involved, had they passed a health care tax on everyone, that would have been constitutional.
Clearly, the federal government has taxing and spending power, yes.
And you would have had no problem with it?
No problem with it being constitutional.
Right.
Politically speaking, whether we agree with that tax is a different story.
Can you point to any federal laws that a state has nullified?
Actually, I can point to the Alien and Sedition Acts that our founders nullified. Actually, in the Kentucky Resolution, Thomas Jefferson, no less than him, stated that, and I quote,
In the last 10 years.
in the last 10 years, I'm answering the question. Yes, there are states that have nullified federal laws.
In the last 10 years.
There are,
Just a few months ago, there were states that nullified some of the federal drug laws with respect to medical marijuana. So yes, there are examples within the last year of that happening.
and Montana for the gun control laws, etc. So this is something. What my point is about going to Thomas Jefferson. This is not a new idea. This has been in effect since the Constitution was adopted. The founders said it, and it holds true today. This is nothing new that we're introducing. We're asking for the reassertion of a right we already have. And we're asking for the federal government to abide by the law.
But hasn't this 10th Amendment, the interpretation of it, been a matter of some dispute? I mean, I imagine the law books are full of U.S. Supreme Court cases that have interpreted differently over different points in our history. Are they not? No? No, not really?
The Constitution has been interpreted in many ways by the federal judiciary. However, the Constitution does not grant to the federal judiciary the authority to interpret that document. Judiciary took it upon themselves to do that in a case called Marbury versus Madison in 1803, and everyone has accepted that since that time. I personally don't accept that. I go by what the founders said. And even the founders said that we are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to the general government.
Yeah.
This is
Isn't there different interpretations of the 10th Amendment?
the legislature in
You guys
Connecticut.
interpret it one way. Don't you think others perhaps interpret it another way, see it as a confirmation
We the
of powers that are granted to the state, yes?
If I could answer that. We the people and the states also have the authority to determine the constitutionality of federal laws. That is a power that was not specifically enumerated in the Constitution to the federal government. Therefore, it's a power that is retained by the states and by the people.
But I'm getting at, isn't there differing opinions, differing definitions of what the 10th Amendment does?
Not what the 10th Amendment does. There are different opinions as to, under the 10th Amendment, whether the legislature...
Are there different interpretations of the 10th Amendment? Yes or no?
No, not
There's people that interpret it just like you guys do.
as far as I am aware, the 10th Amendment stands as the 10th Amendment, and no one in the federal judiciary has nullified it. So the 10th Amendment...
I'm asking if other people have a differing view of the 10th Amendment than you.
I mean, I think what you might be getting at is things like Medicare and Medicaid,
No, I'm not trying to
things
get at any
like...
of that. I'm just
There
asking
are-
a basic question.
there are
Aren't
clauses
there people
in
out
the-
there that don't agree with your interpretation of the 10th Amendment?
No.
Okay.
If you are talking about things like the Commerce Clause, the General Welfare Clause, there are clauses in the Constitution that the Supreme Court has, in some people's opinions, including mine, have tortured and twisted to allow the Congress to pass laws that they think that they should pass. A fabulous example of this is the Wickard versus Filburn case, where a gentleman was growing wheat on his own farm for his own purposes, and the Supreme Court used the Commerce Clause, and the argument was that the fact that he wasn't in interstate commerce affected interstate commerce. That's how twisted this has become. And so what we are doing here is an attempt to let the federal government know that we are wise to their ways of using and abusing the various clauses in the Constitution, completely forgetting about the 10th Amendment.
Is there any proposal other than the health care plans that passed the House and Senate that you feel are especially egregious and violate the Constitution?
Cap and trade.
I'm sorry?
Cap and trade.
And?
There are many others that all of us could mention. All of that.
Just give us a couple of examples.
The big ones, like Medicare and Medicaid. Do you feel those are an overreach? Well, for example, trying to compel individuals to purchase products, that's one. Federal government using taxpayer money to, for private purposes, to take over private companies, to determine what the private companies can do. That's another, just off the top of my head. I'm sure every one of us did. The Kelo case, eminent domain. We could go on and on.
How about aspects of social welfare programs that have now been with us for 40 and 50 years, such as Medicare and Medicaid? Is that an overreach by the federal government?
The short answer is yes, but I don't think politically we are there yet. But when you're talking about social welfare programs, those types of programs should be left to the states, and let the states, through their elected representatives, decide whether this is a program or a benefit or entitlement that they want to provide to their citizens. It is not the federal government's job to do so. If the states want to do it, then the states should do it.
I have one other comment to that. It is not constitutional for the federal government to compel the state to spend the state's money, whatever way.
You said Medicaid and Medicare, and does that, in your opinion, extend to Social Security in the Constitution?
I think that if I'm correct in my reading of the Supreme Court's decision, that the way that that was attacked, or the way that it was brought up is as a tax, and so the Supreme Court decided that because Social Security is in fact a tax, that it is constitutional.
Well, Medicare is also a
16th
tax.
Amendment, I believe.
Medicare is also a tax.
I don't believe that that's actually the way it is argued.
No, Medicare is a tax. You have to look at your pay stub and you'll see it.
That's not
Again, we're not saying that the federal government has no taxing and spending authority. Clearly it does.
Right.
And when they use that in an appropriate manner.
Well, that's what I can't get my hand around here, or my head around it. If they have taxing and spending authority, why isn't Medicare constitutional? And Social Security?
Again, there are many political reasons why one would oppose a lot of these programs and could argue politically that maybe the state could do a better job at it. We're talking here about the 10th Amendment and whether the federal government is usurping the powers that are retained by the state. When they do that, that's unconstitutional. There are many powers that the federal government has that they act and adopt laws under that are constitutional, that politically maybe we agree with, maybe we don't. That's not the issue. The issue is strictly the 10th Amendment and when the federal government usurps its authority.
If the 16th Amendment was never ratified properly, then Social Security and Medicare and all these other taxes in which they were able to oppose and oppress the people, do you feel that if it wasn't properly ratified, that those issues would be brought back to the states?
I think that that is a debate for another day. The particular, any particular program or any particular argument that one may have about whether the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendments were ratified properly is not why we're here, and it's a debate for another day. Maybe one that has merit, but not for today's purposes.
Maybe one of the lawmakers up there can answer this one for me. I counted about 11 Republicans. I didn't count one Democrat. The Democrats run this legislature. You succeeded in getting a resolution on issues and getting a public hearing. What's your strategy after the public hearing for actually getting this passed? And how will you work with the Democrats to get that done?
I believe as an elected representative, it's my responsibility to bring any issues of concern to the legislature and allow the individuals who feel so strongly about this a voice in the process. And we'll see what kind of support it gets. You're right, it is a political body, of course, but this was the first major step in at least allowing the public to be heard on something that obviously is very important to them.
Well, people want more than a voice. They want something passed. So
And we want
what's
people
your
to
plan?
follow their oaths.
I agree with the gentleman's comments in the back that elected officials in the state of Connecticut, this General Assembly, will honor their oath of office and will honor the Constitution. And I believe that affirming the 10th Amendment of the Constitution will be a very simple decision for a state legislator, regardless of what party they come from. And so we believe that once there's an opportunity for a public discussion at a public hearing, that our fellow legislators on the other side of the aisle will agree that affirming the 10th Amendment as a legislative body to Congress is a good idea.
So then you think just the arguments that these folks are going to make at the public hearing will carry the day?
I believe that the document itself, plain and simply written, will carry the day, and that the comments from the public at a public hearing will affirm the document itself.
But in terms of working with the co-chairs, do you have any, are you planning to, after you public the hearing, to try to work with these guys to make sure that your resolution comes to a vote on the floor of the House and Senate?
Yes, I would say that we are anxious to get to the next step, which of course is the public hearing. I can't speak for either of the co-chairs of the committee, but I do believe that as a result of the public hearing, they are going to feel comfortable voting in favor of the resolution before us.
And what exactly does the resolution do? I mean, aside from just reaffirming the 10th Amendment?
Well, a resolution is not the same as a bill that
Right.
would codify anything. So the resolution is basically a statement from the people in the state of Connecticut to the federal government saying that we urge the federal government to adopt only constitutional laws.
That is why we also put forward a bill that would be more proactive, that the legislature should not just let every bill that comes down from Washington, D.C. go through without even a discussion analysis. I think we could do better by actually taking a look at some of these. No Child Left Behind was a very good example of that. Possibly the healthcare bill would have been an excellent example of that. That it's incumbent upon us to scrutinize it We have a lot of talented people in the state, and they could do well to listen to a lot of our good ideas. We did that with campaign finance reform. Connecticut led the nation on ideas that later on our congressmen and our federal senators even brought up before the Congress as a good way to go. Unfortunately, they did not adopt that. But I think that it would be even better if this committee, after hearing the testimony, would do something even more proactive and actually have a process where various bills that are in question are scrutinized, analyzed, and give our best thinking and send that feedback back to Congress.
You know, Christina, to Paul's question as well, a lot of this is just bringing the issue to the forefront. I don't know about any of you, but in my 3 years up here, I've never heard a discussion about the 10th Amendment before these folks brought it up. So a lot of this is actually just bringing it to the attention of the majority party, many of whom have joined us with this. One is, you know, we talked about No Child Left Behind. The Attorney General had brought a lawsuit against that, and one of the claims was that it was beyond the power of the federal government. So this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue, but it's an issue that we as a legislature have been derelict in talking about. And that's why the importance of today and the importance of the public hearing is that all of us, Republicans and Democrats, are going to start thinking about the 10th Amendment and how the federal laws that have been passed actually apply. So I think, you know, as you guys have talked about, you know, how you're going to get this passed, et cetera, a lot of it is just getting the discussion started to make sure folks in this building are always keeping the Constitution front and center where it should be.
From my perspective, from talking from the people are not going to forget this issue, and we will work wholeheartedly to try to bring this attention to the attention of everyone in the legislature, and hopefully at some point in the future we can get version B or version C or whatever legislation actually adopted into law where we do have a method where we can scrutinize whatever federal laws be allowed.
About version B, I'm looking at section 3. Upon recommendation, the general shall vote to memorialize Congress as to the findings of the committee regarding the legality of the statute, regulation, or directive. So basically, what does that mean? You're just sending Congress a sense of Connecticut that this law is unconstitutional, but that's it? I mean, you're not saying that this law will not be enforced in Connecticut. We won't recognize this law. You're just saying we don't think this law is constitutional. Is that the upshot?
This is a method that the legislature could determine the legality and determine what it wants to do about that at any point. This is what the language does in version B. And then the legislature, having scrutinized it and determined the legality and determined whether or not it should be complied with or whatever they deem is appropriate at that point, then there's a method by which the legislature can tell Congress and tell Washington what the legislature has determined to do about it.
If you don't believe in the legitimacy of the federal judiciary to adjudicate these disputes over what is overreaching constitutionally, where do you hope to go with this? Or do you want to, are you trying to set the state on a path where you force a confrontation of some kind, where the state of Connecticut would defy the feds over one of these issues? Help me understand where, I mean, politically and legally, if you've, and you're an attorney, right?
Yes.
So if legally, you know, you question the legitimacy of the judiciary to referee this dispute, where do you go? How do you fight it out?
Again, I'm going back to the founders and their understanding of what the federal government is. And if the founders believed that the states were joining together under the federal government and gave the federal government certain powers and retained others by the states, then it's up to the states in whatever form they deem is appropriate by their legislature to determine what to do about anything that is unconstitutional. And in that sense, I'm not saying it, the founders said it, and the legislature will be saying it. So in whatever form it takes, it is what it is. But the 10th Amendment is in existence and should not be ignored.
Okay, but let's say the resolution passed. It's a nice statement of interest. Then where do you go? What's the next step to achieve some of the things you're talking about?
And again, that's where the people of the state will be contacting their legislators through this process And we don't know where it will wind up. We have proposed legislation, and as you know, when you propose legislation, sometimes the language gets changed, sometimes more happens, sometimes it dies. We don't know at this point. We're proposing it. We're asking all of the legislators of the state to take a hard look at what we're proposing, discuss this issue, and come up with a reasonable way to stop the unconstitutional infringement of all of our rights.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. Just for clarification from a legislator's viewpoint on a resolution and the reporter's questions sort of inferring that it doesn't have any juice. On the contrary, this Connecticut General Assembly has a long history of communicating with the United States Congress and other bodies by way of a resolution. And so a resolution, if you just think about what it's taken to get to this point, that citizens of this state in the hundreds have communicated to their legislators asking for attention to the matter. The matter then was formalized in the way of proposals, brought to a legislative committee, and now is at the next step of a public hearing. Congress, understanding the legislative process, is not going to ignore the fact that so many people are involved in raising the issue and the importance of it. Does it define and resolve the issue of concerns about the 10th Amendment here in the state of Connecticut? No. But what it does do very clearly is put on record that the state of Connecticut and its citizens and legislators are watching Washington, D.C., and you need to be more attentive to the legislation that you're passing down to states by way of unfunded mandates. And P.S., Connecticut General Assembly, don't do the same. That unfunded mandates apply to us too, and that we really shouldn't be passing them on down to our local municipalities.
I would like to add just one last thing before I go, and that is something that was said at the very beginning that is very important and shouldn't be lost. Connecticut is the Constitution state, not because it signed the Constitution as first, but because it had the first original model Constitution called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, where it stated that it was going to be governed by the free will of its people. This was way before, 100 years before we had a Constitution formalized as a country. And I have to tell you that you shouldn't downplay this moment that we have, because this moment sets a process in motion that would lead the nation in creating a process where we actually give feedback to the federal government. And I'm hoping that other states will model this, because when you ask how effective will this be, it will be very effective if not just one, but 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 states analyze a particular legislation and all remark that this is overstepping their bounds. It may give them pause and have them rethink the direction that they've gone. So that's why this moment is so important, and why I'm proud that Connecticut is taking this lead role. Thank you all very much.